Israel shuts down Al Jazeera office in Jerusalem. OIC members urged to impose sanctions against Israel. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Otto Othman and this is World Today. Israeli authorities raided a Jerusalem hotel room used by Al Jazeera as its office after the government decided to shut down the Qatari-owned TV station's local operations on Sunday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet shut down the network for as long as the war in Gaza continues, claiming it threatened national security. Al Jazeera said the move was a criminal action, and the accusation that the network threatened Israeli security was a quote-unquote dangerous and ridiculous lie that put its journalists at risk. The news channel said it reserves the right to quote-unquote pursue every legal step. Israeli satellite and cable television providers suspended Al Jazeera broadcasts following the government's decision. The law allows Netanyahu and his security cabinet to shut the network's offices in Israel for 45 days, a period that can be renewed so it could stay in force until the end of July or until the end of major military operations in Gaza. Meanwhile, Al Jazeera's coverage on Israel and the war in Gaza will not be affected by a shutdown order issued by the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The channel's Arabic managing editor, Muhammad Mawad, said imperial coverage will continue from both sides, despite the fact that they have lost the coverage from inside Israel. The measure issued on Sunday includes closing Al Jazeera's offices in Israel, confiscating broadcast equipment, cutting off the channel from cable and satellite companies, and blocking its websites as long as the war continued. Mawad said Al Jazeera, however, has other kind of methods to news gathering and will continue to be committed to the objective coverage of that they have been committed to from the beginning of this war. The network last month complained of a series of systematic Israeli attacks to silence Al Jazeera, citing the killing of several of its journalists working in Gaza during the conflict. The United Nations Human Rights Office also criticized the closure. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation (OIC) on Sunday denounced a genocide in Gaza, urging its 57 member countries to impose sanctions on Israel in a resolution adopted at the end of its Gambia summit. The organization called on its members to impose sanctions on Israel and halting the export of weapons and ammunition used by its army to perpetrate the crime of genocide in Gaza. Sunday's resolution urged members to exercise diplomatic, political and legal pressure and to take any deterrent measures to stop the crimes of the Israeli colonial occupation and the genocidal war it is waging against the Palestinian people. It also called for an immediate, permanent and unconditional ceasefire. The 15th OIC summit, which started Saturday, focused on Egypt's capital Cairo, where a meeting on a proposed truce linked to the release of hostages in Gaza was held this weekend without any concrete progress. Only a handful of African leaders attended the OIC summit in person, most leaders of the 57-member countries sending representatives. Founded in 1969 after the burning of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the OIC aims to increase Muslim solidarity, support the Palestinian struggle, and defend Muslim holy sites. An Israeli airstrike hit a house in Rafah on Sunday, killing 6 people and wounding several others. The strike comes hours after the armed wing of Hamas claimed responsibility for an attack on the Kerem Shalom crossing between Israel and Gaza. Hamas armed wing said it fired rockets at an Israeli army base by the crossing, but did not confirm where it fired them from. Hamas media quoted a source close to the group as saying the commercial crossing was not the target. Shortly after the Hamas attack, an Israeli airstrike hit a house in Rafah, killing 3 people and wounding several. The Israeli military confirmed the counter-strike, claiming it struck the launcher from which the Hamas projectiles were fired. Prospects for a ceasefire appeared slim on Sunday as Hamas reiterated its demand for an end to the war in exchange for the freeing of hostages, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu flatly ruled that out. Israel has vowed to enter the southern Gaza city and flush out Hamas forces there, but has faced mounting pressure to hold fire as the operation could derail fragile humanitarian efforts in Gaza and endanger many more lives. China's President Xi Jinping arrived in France on Sunday for a rare visit on his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. The French president is set to press him to reduce trade imbalances and try to convince him to use his influence on Russia over the war in Ukraine. The Chinese president and his wife, Peng Liyuan, were greeted by French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal at Orly Airport. During Xi's two-day stay in France, his official meetings will include joint talks with French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. Upon his arrival, Xi said that China is ready to consolidate traditional friendship, enhance mutual political trust, build strategic consensus, deepen exchanges and cooperation with France. Macron will take Xi to the Pyrenees, a mountainous region, on Tuesday before Xi heads to Russia-friendly Serbia and Hungary. This is the second state visit by President Xi to France in 5 years. It coincides with the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between China and France. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said investigations into the arrests made in relation to last year's murder of a Sikh separatist leader remain ongoing. Trudeau said nothing else about the arrests, but he praised the Canadian justice system as strong and independent, adding that Canada has a fundamental commitment to protecting its citizens. He also acknowledged that members of the Sikh community may feel uneasy and frightened. Trudeau said the Royal Canadian Mounted Police has at least 2 investigations open, one that is not limited to the involvement of the 3 people arrested yesterday. Canadian police charged 3 people on Friday over the murder of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was a Canadian citizen, and said they were probing whether the suspects had links to the Indian government. Nijjar, 45, was shot dead in June outside a Sikh temple in Surrey, a Vancouver suburb with a large Sikh population. A few months later, Trudeau cited credible allegations of Indian government involvement, prompting a diplomatic crisis with New Delhi. Polling stations closed across Panama on Sunday and ballot counting began as Panamanians waited to see the result of presidential elections. As soon as the last voter dropped his ballot into the ballot box, polling center officials opened boxes in preparation for counting. Panamanians braved scorching heat on Sunday to vote in a general election to choose the next president in an 8-person race. Jose Raul Molino, a former minister who replaced popular ex-president Ricardo Martinelli on the ballot after Martinelli was barred from running due to a money laundering conviction, is leading in opinion polls. Romulo Ro, in his second bid to win the presidency, and ex-president Martin Torrijos have alternated between second and third place. Trailing closely behind is Ricardo Lombana, who also ran in the past election, and current Vice President Jose Gabriel Carrizo. Panama's electoral rules do not require a runoff, making Sunday's result final. No single party is forecast to win control of the legislature, where 885 seats are up for grabs. Up next, Australian police gunned down 16-year-old knife attacker. Stay with us. Western Australian police shot and killed a radicalized 16-year-old boy with a knife who had stabbed a man in a Perth car park. Now, police believe the attackers suffered from mental and online radicalization issues. State's Police Commissioner Blanche said police received a call late on Saturday from a male warning that he was going to commit acts of violence, but without giving his name or location. Within minutes, another emergency call alerted police that a male with a knife was running around the car park. in Wellington, a southern suburb of Perth. Police body camera images showed the teenager refused officers' demands that he put down the knife. The teenager rushed at police, who responded by shooting him twice with tasers before firing a single fatal shot. The teenager died in hospital later in the night. In the past 2 years, the attacker had been part of a countering violence extremism program for people who show signs of religious or issues-motivated concerns. The man who had been stabbed suffered a single, possibly 2-centimeter stab wound that may have punctured a lung. He is reported to be in stable condition and appeared to be doing well. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said he had been briefed by police and intelligence services who had advised there was no ongoing threat.
We are dealing with...
The parents of an American and 2 Australian surfers presumed to have been killed in northern Mexico have arrived in the country and will try to identify the dead bodies believed to be their children. Baja California's State Attorney General Maria Elena Andrey said the parents were currently filling out paperwork to see if the bodies could be physically identified, that is to say, in plain sight.
Están haciendo en este momento los trámites para la identificación de los cuerpos, que al parecer hay evidencias por los cuales pueden ser identificados físicamente, es decir, a la vista. Si ellos en estos momentos hacen esa identificación, nos obviaríamos el resultado de las pruebas de ADN o de genética. Si ellos manifestaran en algún momento que no tienen la certeza completa que se trate de su familiar, entonces nos iríamos al tiempo de las pruebas de genética.
The 3 foreigners went missing while on a vacation, surfing near the popular tourist town of Ensenada, about 90 minutes south of the U.S.-Mexico border on the Pacific coast. The trio were reported missing when they failed to check into a pre-arranged accommodation in Rosarito, Mexico last weekend. They were last seen on 27 April and reported missing a couple of days later, when authorities launched a multi-day search with the help from the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. The bodies were found dumped in a remote well about 15 meters deep, about 6 kilometers from the camping site where the foreigners were believed to have been killed. Kenya said on Sunday that the death toll from weeks of devastating rains and floods had risen to 228 and warned that there was no sign of it letting up in the crisis. Now, while Kenya and neighboring Tanzania escaped major damage from a tropical cyclone that weakened after making landfall on Saturday, the government in Nairobi said the country continued to endure torrential downpours and the risk of further floods and landslides. In western Kenya, the river Nyando burst its banks in the early hours of Sunday, engulfing a police station, school, hospital and market in the town of Ahero in Kisumu County. There were no immediate reports of casualties, but local police said water levels were still rising and that the main bridge outside Kisumu on the highway of Nairobi was submerged. Weeks of heavier than usual seasonal rains, compounded by the El Nino weather pattern, have wreaked chaos in many parts of East Africa, a region highly vulnerable to climate change. More than 400 people have been killed and several 100,000 uprooted from their homes in several countries as floods and mudslides swamp houses, roads and bridges. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva arrived in Rio Grande do Sul on Sunday, along with most members of his cabinet, to discuss rescue and reconstruction works with local authorities. Now, the death toll from heavy rains that have caused flooding in Brazil's southern state has risen to at least 78, with tens of thousands of people displaced. The death toll could still substantially increase as 103 people were reported missing on Sunday, up from about 70 the prior day. Investigations were ongoing to determine whether another 6 deaths were related to the storms. During a press conference with Rio Grande do Sul Governor Eduardo Leite, Lula said the federal government will provide resources for reconstructing roads damaged by the rains. He also asked local authorities not to rebuild houses in risk areas. Flooding from storms in the past few days have affected about 2/3 of the nearly 500 towns and cities in the state, which borders Uruguay and Argentina, leaving more than 88,000 displaced. Floods have destroyed roads and bridges in several cities. The rains also have triggered landslides and the partial collapse of a dam at a small hydroelectric power plant. The final rehearsal for this year's Victory Day military parade was held on Sunday in Red Square of central Moscow, Russia. Now, according to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, more than 9,000 military personnel and 70 items of military hardware will participate in the grand ceremony to commemorate the 79th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory in the Great Patriotic War of 1941 to 1945. The rehearsal was conducted in full accordance with the procedures of the official parade to be held in Red Square on the Victory Day. The foot formation included teams from all branches of the Russian Army, non-commissioned officers, academies, female soldiers, and other military personnel. T-34 tanks, the Iskander-M missile system, the S-400 air defense missile systems, the Yars ballistic missiles, and other weapons and equipment were displayed during the rehearsal. On 24th June 1945, the Soviet Union held its first military parade in Red Square to mark the victory in the Great Patriotic War against Nazi Germany, an integral part of World War II. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Russia has held a military parade and a series of celebrations on May 9th every year since 1995 to commemorate the triumph over Nazi Germany. In sports, Liverpool halts Spurs' dream of top 4 finish. Stay with us. Kicking off our sports segment this afternoon, Liverpool shattered Tottenham Hotspur's hopes of finishing in the Premier League's top 4 with a 4-2 win last night. Jurgen Klopp said the victory was a mirror of their season as the Reds held off a late wobble to further dent Spurs' hopes of a spot in Champions League next season. The Reds had won just one of their previous 5 league games to realistically end their shot at the title, but were back in the groove as they raced into a 4-0 lead. Mohamed Salah was restored to the starting lineup after his public spat with Klopp last weekend and opened the floodgates before Andy Robertson, Cody Gakpo and Harvey Elliott were also on target. Richarlison and Son Heung-min replied late on for Tottenham, but the damage to their chances of Champions League football next season was already done. Klopp's men are guaranteed to finish no lower than 3rd and close the gap on leaders Arsenal to 5 points with 2 games remaining. Spurs have now lost 4 consecutive games to leave Ange Postecoglou's men still 7 points adrift of 4th-placed Aston Villa with just 9 left to play for. Lionel Messi had an MLS record 6 goal contributions. Luis Suarez scored 3 times and Mateus Rojas recorded a brace in as Inter Miami thumped the New York Red Bulls 6-2. Messi, who was named MLS Player of the Month for the month of April, scored once and added 5 assists as Miami extended its unbeaten streak to 6 matches. Miami dominated time of possession in the first half, but it was New York that had 2 shots on target and a 1-0 lead at the halftime whistle. The Red Bulls opened the scoring in the 30th minute through Dante Vanzier for his second goal of the season. Mateas Rojas was brought on for David Ruiz to start the second half and immediately made an impact, leveling the score at 1-1 in the 48th minute by putting a left-footed strike past a leaping Carlos Coronel. Then, in the 50th minute, Messi put a left-footed strike off Suarez passed into the back of the net for his 10th goal of the season. Miami took a 3-1 lead in the 62nd minute as Rojas put a Messi through ball up and over Coronel. Suarez made it 4-1 in the 69th minute, redirecting a Messi pass for his 8th goal of the season. In the 75th minute, Suarez completed a give and go with Messi to make it 5-1. Suarez completed the hat-trick in the 81st minute, taking a Messi through ball and getting around a diving Coronel for his 10th goal of the season. Forsberg was awarded a second-half stoppage time penalty kick and scored to cut Miami's lead to 4. Andrey Rublev won the Madrid Open with a hard-fought 4-6, 7-5, 7-5 victory over Felix Auger-Aliassime on Sunday to secure his second title of the year despite battling with illness. The Russian world number 8 said he was, quote-unquote, almost dead every day and could barely sleep this week after securing a career second Masters 1000 victory. Rublev had lost 4 consecutive matches before arriving in the Spanish capital, but came from a set down to beat his Canadian opponent. Auger-Aliassime started superbly by breaking to love in the first game, and then again in the 5th game for a 4-1 lead. Rublev recovered a break when Auger-Aliassime went long and consolidated for a 4-3 deficit. The Russian saved a set point to hold for 5-4 down, but Auger-Aliassime clinched it at the second opportunity with a forehand down the line. In the second set, the Canadian held for 3-3 with a brilliant drop shot after Rublev spurned a break point. They stayed on serve until the 12th game, when Rublev brought up 2 set points, converting the second to take it to a deciding third set. Rublev raced through his service games and put heavy pressure on his opponent's serve, forcing a break point in the second game and 2 more in the 4th, none of which he could take. Auger-Aliassime produced huge serves to fight his way out of tough spots, raking up 14 aces in the match to Rublev's 7. However, Rublev dropped just 3 points on his serve in the third set, while Auger-Aliassime trailed in all of his service games but always battled back until the decisive 12th game. Auger-Aliassime double faulted to hand Rublev the title, with the Russian falling to the floor in delight. In cycling, favorite Tadej Pogačar made light of a mechanical problem to blast into the lead of the Giro dItalia with victory on the summit finish to the 161-kilometer second stage on Sunday. The Slovenian suffered a puncture at the foot of the steep 11-kilometer climb to Santuario di Europa, but he was helped back into the group by his teammates before launching a devastating solo attack. No one could stay with the UAE Team Emirates rider, who poured on the power to win by 27 seconds and take possession of the Maglia Rosa 2 days into his maiden Giro. Dani Martinez of Bora Hansgrohe was second, just ahead of Ineos Grenadiers leader, Geraint Thomas. Pogačar had already gained time on his general classification rivals in Saturday's opening stage when he was outsprinted to the line by Jonathan Narvaez, who wore the Magnolia Rosa on Sunday. But by the end of stage 2, he already has a 45-second advantage over Britain's Thomas, who is regarded as the most likely challenger to Pogačar over the next 3 weeks. Thomas and Martinez are second and third in the standings, with only 2 other riders within a minute of Pogačar. French designer Mathieu Lehionnoir revealed on Friday the design of the 2024 Olympics Cauldron, which will be lit for the first time on 8th May. in Marseille with the arrival of the Bellum in France. Now, the Cauldron, designed as a circular ring, will be lit at the celebration site of each stopover city by the last bearer of the flame of the day to invite people to gather around it and celebrate. Made from stainless steel and aluminium and produced in only 20 copies, the Cauldron weighs nearly 100 kilograms and is 1.35 meter in diameter and 1.15 meter high. From crossing the Mediterranean Sea to the River Seine, scene of the opening ceremony of the games and competition site, water is symbolized both on the torch and at the base of the Cauldron with ripple effects. It is not until the last day of the torch rally, only 26 July, that the Olympic Bowl will replace the Cauldron to open the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. In golf, Brooks Koepka won the Live Singapore by 2 shots at the Sentosa Golf Club on Sunday. The 34-year-old American, who led overnight by 3 strokes, made 4 birdies and a bogey in his final round of 3 under par 68 to finish on 15 under par and become the first player to win 4 Live golf titles. Australians Cameron Smith and Mark Leishman finished joint second, 2 shots behind on 13 under par. Smith carded a round of 7 under par 64, while Leishman shot a 5 under par 66. American Taylor Gooch finished 4th, a further shot back on 12 under par. In the team competition, the Ripper GC quartet of Captain Smith, Leishman, Lucas Herber, and Matt Jones finished top of the leaderboard with a total of 32 under par. Fireballs GC and Cleeks GC were joint second on 29 under par. Cesar Luis Menotti, who led a dashing Argentina team to victory in the 1978 World Cup, has passed away. He was 85. Menotti, who was born in Rosario, Argentina in 1938, won 11 cups for Argentina in the 1960s and then managed 11 clubs, some more than once, and 2 national teams in a coaching career that lasted 37 years. He is best remembered for leading Argentina to the 1978 World Cup and the Under-20 title the following year. His reign ended after the 1982 World Cup in Spain, which kicked off just before Argentina surrendered in the Falklands War. Argentina were eliminated by Brazil 3-1 in a second-round defeat that ended the Maradona being sent off. Menotti won 2 cups in 2 seasons with Barcelona, the last trophies in a coaching career that took him to Italy, Mexico, and Uruguay, and back to Argentina. He maintained a lifelong feud with coaches in the more pragmatic Argentine tradition and believed football styles are political. Menotti, a striker, started his playing career with the club he supported, Rosario Central. He moved to Boca Juniors, where he won an Argentine title, then to the New York Generals, and from there to Santos in Brazil, where he played alongside Pelé. He became an assistant coach at Central City rivals Newell's Old Boys. In 1973, he led Huracan to their only league title since 1928. He became a national manager in 1974 and, despite being a member of the Communist Party, stayed on when the military seized power in 1976. And with that, we've reached the end of today's bulletin. In our top story, Israel shuts down Al Jazeera office in Jerusalem, citing national security threat. Now, do join us tonight at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and Saluran Berita RTM for more news, or you can catch us online on RTM Click website or mobile app. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I'm Otto Othman. Have a pleasant evening ahead.